It felt like a cruel joke when my wife banned my entire family from seeing our newborn. While her parents visited every single day, my poor mom was left crying on the phone, begging for just one photo. I couldn't understand why she was being so cold to them. They're just too loud, she claimed, but that excuse didn't sit right with me. The tension in our house was unbearable until her sister finally pulled me aside in the kitchen. She looked terrified to speak. She leaned in and whispered a secret so shocking that it explained everything, and my whole world instantly crumbled. Michael sat on the plush armchair, feeling invisible in his own living room. He watched as Sarah's parents took turns cooing over the newborn, passing him back and forth like a trophy. His phone buzzed against his thigh, a persistent vibration that made him flinch. He glanced down to see Martha's name flashing on the screen again. She had been calling all morning, desperate for an update. Michael looked at Sarah, hoping for a sign that he could answer, but she was too busy laughing with her father. He sighed heavily and sent the call to voicemail, sliding the phone back into his pocket. He couldn't bear to hear his mother crying again when he had no good news to give her. Across the room, Sarah beamed as she gently passed their son into her mother's waiting arms. The older woman cradled the infant, humming a soft lullaby that seemed to delight Sarah. It stung Michael to see how easily she shared their child with everyone except his side of the family. Michael waited for a quiet moment before approaching his wife near the kitchen doorway. He kept his voice low, asking if his mother could perhaps visit tomorrow, just for a few minutes. Sarah's demeanor changed instantly. She shook her head firmly, her eyes narrowing in frustration. She didn't even consider the request. It was a flat refusal, delivered with a coldness that startled him. She turned away, making it clear the subject was not up for debate. When he tried to press her for a valid reason, she fell back on her usual excuse. She claimed that the Johnson family was simply too loud and boisterous for a newborn. She insisted that his mother's presence would disrupt the baby's sleeping schedule, which she was trying so hard to establish. Michael pointed out that her own house was full of noise and laughter right now, but she waved him off. She accused him of not caring about the baby's routine. The rejection stung, and the crowded living room suddenly felt suffocating. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and the sound of exclusion. Michael couldn't stand to watch them anymore. He needed to get away from the happy scene that he wasn't allowed to be part of. He muttered an excuse about being thirsty and turned toward the kitchen. He needed a moment of silence and a glass of cold water to clear his head. He hadn't even reached the refrigerator when he heard the soft click of footsteps behind him. Sarah's sister, Emily, had followed him into the kitchen. She didn't say anything immediately. Instead, she peered back into the hallway, scanning the area to ensure no one else had followed them. Her behavior was odd, shifting from her usual bubbly self to someone deeply on edge. She looked like she was afraid of being caught. Emily gently pushed the kitchen door until it latched shut, cutting off the noise from the living room. The sudden silence was heavy. Michael walked over to the cabinet and grabbed a glass, watching her reflection in the window. She stood by the door, wringing her hands together nervously. He poured himself some ice water from the fridge dispenser, the clinking of the cubes echoing in the quiet room. He took a slow sip, waiting for her to speak. Before he could ask what was wrong, Emily rushed forward and grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her fingers digging into his sleeve. She looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes and told him she had something urgent to say. Her voice was trembling. Michael froze, the glass halfway to his mouth. He could see the panic radiating off her. Whatever she needed to tell him, it was clearly eating her alive. Michael carefully pulled his arm away and leaned back against the cool granite counter to steady himself. He studied her pale face and asked her why she was acting so nervous and strange. They had known each other for years, but he had never seen her like this. Emily took a shaky breath and looked down at her shoes. She seemed to be fighting an internal battle, debating whether to betray her sister's trust or keep the secret buried. She stepped closer, invading his personal space to ensure their conversation remained private. Emily lowered her voice to a barely audible whisper, her eyes darting to the closed door one last time. She looked terrified that Sarah might burst in at any second. The tension in the room was palpable. Michael leaned in, his heart rate picking up speed. He nodded at her to continue, signaling that he was ready to listen. Emily swallowed hard and confessed that the ban on his family had nothing to do with noise. She revealed that Sarah was actually terrified of Michael's mother seeing the baby up close. The excuse about the sleeping schedule was just a lie to keep Martha away. Sarah knew that Martha had raised a large family and had an eagle eye for details. Emily paused, letting the implication hang in the air between them. She explained that Sarah was consumed by anxiety that Martha would notice something strange about the baby's physical appearance. it wasn't about behavior. It was about scrutiny. Sarah was convinced that if Martha held the child, she would spot inconsistencies that others might miss. She was trying to hide the baby in plain sight, surrounding him only with people who wouldn't ask difficult questions. Michael felt a cold chill run down his spine. Michael set his water glass down on the counter with a loud thud that made Emily jump. He crossed his arms and demanded that she explain herself more clearly. He didn't want riddles, he wanted the truth. He asked what specifically was wrong with the baby's appearance. Emily flinched at the anger in his voice but didn't back away. She knew there was no turning back now. She had to finish what she started. She took a deep breath and let the secret spill out. Emily nervously admitted that Sarah was terrified his mother would notice the baby didn't share any of the distinctive Johnson family traits. The Johnson genes were strong, usually dominating in every grandchild. Sarah knew Martha would look for the family nose or the specific shape of the eyes. The absence of these traits was something Sarah feared would trigger immediate suspicion. The revelation hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He didn't say another word to Emily. He pushed past her, throwing the kitchen door open and marching back into the living room. Sarah looked up, startled by his abrupt return, but he ignored her completely. He needed to see the baby with fresh eyes. He walked straight up to his mother-in-law and looked down at the swaddled infant in her arms. Michael stared intently at the sleeping child, searching desperately for a trace of himself. He looked for the crooked nose that all the Johnson men had or the dimple in the chin. He scanned the baby's features, looking for anything familiar. But as he looked, the realization began to dawn on him. The face looking back at him was a complete stranger's. There was nothing of him in that child. He realized with a sinking heart that the baby had bright blue eyes and tufts of blonde hair. The Johnson family was known for dark brown eyes and thick dark hair. Even as newborns, the difference was usually clear. This child looked nothing like him, nor anyone in his entire lineage. The physical mismatch was glaring now that he was really looking. It was biologically impossible for this to be his son. Sarah noticed the way Michael was staring at the baby, his face draining of color. She panicked. She quickly swooped in and took the baby away from her mother, pulling the infant close to her chest to shield him from Michael's view. She muttered something about the baby needing to be changed and turned her back on him. Her movements were jerky and frantic. She was trying to run from the truth. Michael wasn't going to let her escape. He turned around and grabbed Emily, dragging her back into the kitchen before Sarah could intervene. He shut the door firmly and cornered his sister-in-law. He told her that he knew there was more to the story and demanded the whole truth. He could see the guilt written all over her face. He told her not to protect her sister anymore. Emily broke down completely. She started crying, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands. The sound of her sobbing filled the small kitchen. Michael stood there, his fists clenched at his sides, waiting for her to compose herself. He didn't offer any comfort, he just watched her, his patience entirely evaporated. He needed to hear the words out loud. Emily finally wiped her eyes and revealed the devastating truth. She told him that the baby was not his son because Sarah had been having a long-term affair. It had been going on for over a year with a man from her work. Sarah had gotten pregnant and in her panic decided to pass the baby off as Michael's. She had hoped the physical differences wouldn't be too obvious. She explained that Sarah had banned his family specifically to prevent them from realizing the child shared no DNA with him. She knew that while her own parents were oblivious, Michael's mother would have figured it out the moment she saw the baby. The cruelty to his mother was just a cover-up for her own infidelity. It was a calculated move to protect her secret life. A strange, cold clarity washed over Michael. He walked out of the kitchen and strode into the living room. Sarah's parents looked up with smiles that quickly faded when they saw his face. Michael told them to leave his house immediately. He didn't shout, but his voice was like steel. They looked to Sarah for an explanation, but she was pale and silent. They hurried to gather their things. The house was quiet that night. Michael slept in the guest room with the door locked. The next morning, before Sarah could even attempt to apologize, he handed her divorce papers. He had already contacted a lawyer to arrange a court-ordered paternity test to confirm what he already knew. Sarah tried to grab his arm, crying and begging, but he pulled away. He was done listening to her lies. Michael packed his bags, taking only what he needed. He walked out the front door without looking back at the life he thought he had. He got into his car and drove straight to his mother's house. Martha was waiting for him on the porch, her arms open. He walked up the steps and hugged her tightly, finally letting his own tears fall. He was safe now.